I've read so many accounts of what Balthazar is about, and each one is about a different movie. One says it's an animal picture. The other says the animal's really Christ, it's an allegory. I think one of the enormous strengths of this picture is that it is all these things at once. If you talk about Bresson, then his style is what you talk about, so automatically you're talking about him. So if you define the style, you're sort of defining the man himself. Among the influences which would make the man himself, we have to be very careful about picking and choosing. One of the ones that's often chosen is to call Bresson a Catholic and to equate the careful meagerness of a certain kind of Catholic with him, to indicate that he shares this, and to call this a theological trait. This is done by a lot of people. It's sort of, maybe it's not true, because Bresson himself, in his notes on cinematography, has stated that his Catholicism is really something else, that it's not the kind of Catholicism that one would ordinarily expect from a Catholic. But nonetheless, let's just say instead that the idea of religion plays a large part in the conception of this director called Bresson. Whenever I see a Bresson film, and I see everyone I can as often as I can, I'm always impressed by the quality of waiting. People always seem to be waiting for something. That could be, of course, a Christian attribute. The Christians are always waiting for something like the end, for example. But all of these things put together constitute the man, and hence the style. I've never read a book, and I'm certainly not myself not capable of writing one, which would put all of this in a coherent way. And indeed, one of the things that I admire most about Bresson is the fact that I cannot define him. The fact that he's too near to me, he's too close to the spectator to ever, step back like you can step back and say anything you want about most directors. I feel that I could not do that with Bresson simply because of his nearness. And this has to do with something in me, it has to do with something in him, but it has to do with the technique. The fact that this is one technique which holds off the spectator is indeed part of its fascination. I often think that maybe Bresson is using his spectator much as he used his actors. Once, a couple of years ago, when they were having a big Bresson retrospective in Tokyo, I was very fortunate enough to be able to spend an evening with Anne Wyszynski, the person who plays Marie in this film. And interested as I was in Bresson's techniques, the first question that popped out of my mouth surprised me. I wanted to know what happened to the people. What happened to Gérard? I asked her once. And she said, oh, Gérard died. He died very badly, and he certainly is not around anymore. Well, what happened to? And I realized that I had confused Hasard Balthazar with life. That it had made such an impression all the many times that I'd seen it. And I was very surprised at this. She appeared not to be surprised at all. Maybe people always react like this. But I then was able to go into something more rational, which was to ask how she had created that wonderful performance. And she smiled in her charming way and said, of course she didn't create it herself. She just stood there. That Bresson never actually told her to try anything. That what he wanted was what already existed in her, which he was unveiling by taking her picture. This sort of the wonderful X-ray eye that he had, where he can look at you and know who you are.
Marie.
He uses people to the extent that they are barely people. He uses unknowns, and he doesn't call them actors, he calls them models. And he will have them do the same thing over and over again until they have dropped what little vestige of self they ever had.
Marie! Marie!
The idea of utter and complete control over space, over time. All of these are attributes of a style which is so carefully anonymous that it shouts for attention. Bresson's style is discreet to the point of invisibility, and yet at the same time we can say things about it. It only shows what is essential, but what Bresson sees as essential, not what we do. Very often, in film after film, we'll follow the feet of the people, the legs of the people, the hands of the people. These are important, more important than the faces. There's a joke that said that Bresson finally was going to get to do the Bible, and then he's going to do Noah's Ark, and they had everything set. The lights went up, and the animals were ready to climb up into the ark, and he positioned the cameras and said, "You realize I'm only showing the feet." In regards to this film and other films, people have spoken about kind of a necessary cruelty in Bresson. I mean, why beat the poor donkey? Well, if you think this is a Disney picture and that beating the poor donkey is bad for the donkey, then you're looking at something. But in a picture like Bresson, the idea of cruelty is so close to all the other qualities, salvation, for example, that it makes it very difficult to think of him as being concerned about one quality at a time. What I like about Bresson is that in his pictures we're usually concerned about 2 or 3 qualities simultaneously.
Jacques, Marie.
But beyond all that, we're interested in a further meaning which we cannot quite grasp. We teeter on the edge, and I think the film teeters dangerously when we see our protagonist, the donkey, practically crowned with palm leaves. But again, the film recovers itself so magnificently. Anybody who's seen that will retain the mirage of the circus sequence, where we see the animals as though they were human. The look of the lion, the look of the elephant, all of this done in complete silence, as though this is the point of view of Balthazar, which it might not be. All of these things equated, and all of them mysterious. I guess it's the mystery of Hasard Balthazar that I prize most. I've often thought that Bresson is a director that appeals to each person so individually that everybody has his or her own personal vision of what it is that the director has done. You don't have to like him or not, but you've got this vision. The people who revere him are numerous enough to have formed sort of a group. I obviously am a member of this group. But there are others. I take friends of mine, to see a revival of a Bresson, and, I tell them, "No, you got to watch this. This is some film," only to have them fall asleep or start yawning uncontrollably, or afterwards the film's over, they say, "Oh, Jesus Christ." Now, obviously, these are friends of mine. They share something with me. We have something going, or else we wouldn't be friends with each other. And yet we have such opposite reactions to the films of Bresson. And I think that's an indication of the strength of Bresson, is that he calls forth emotions to the extent that you reveal yourself in a strange kind of way with Bresson. I'm not saying that I'm better because I cry, or that my friend is worse because he goes to sleep. I'm simply saying that the wavelength of Bresson indicates that you have to go deeper into yourself in seeing Bresson than you usually do in the films of most directors. Is it a Rorschach test? I don't know. But there are enough people who are sort of convinced by what he shows us that they first are willing and later look forward to. How many times have I seen Hasard Balthazar? Oh, many, many times, because I like what it does to me. It's like traveling. You go to a city where you like yourself. I think maybe you go to a movie where you like yourself. Other reasons maybe for the persuasiveness of Bresson is the fact he's the only director that I know of that addresses our two senses simultaneously. He never shortchanges them. Usually most directors are going to show us this or we're going to make us listen to that. In the case of Bresson, they're pretty well balanced, and sometimes the unexpected takes over. At the beginning of Hasard Balthazar, we get the whole thing, and just in the sound. We get the Schubert sonata, we get the background noises, nature, they're out in the old country home, and this is broken by a donkey's bray. So they've got the whole story right there. So he uses sound to what? Encapsulate his meanings. Look at the ending of Hasard Balthazar, where without any comment at all, just sounds, the soughing of the wind, the bells of the sheep, and then the miraculous entry of the main theme from the Schubert as closure. Then we watch what this causes, and this causes Balthazar to gently kneel down and die before our very eyes. He moves in mysterious ways to create an emotional ambience that means that I find it impossible to look at the final scenes of this picture without crying. I mean, for a picture to have this effect upon one time and time again argues for something which I really don't understand. But when the Schubert starts and the donkey collapses and the sheep gather and the little bells sound, the combination of, something awful and something wonderful going together, it defeats any critical acumen I may have. And it reduces me to the emotional human being, which I think was Bresson's intention in making this picture.